Okay. Anyways, just want to start with uh, just a summary of some of the things we've been doing the past month or so. So on the agenda today, just give a quick feedback of our activities at LPSC, which is a couple of weeks ago. Give some update on our Planetary Research Cooperative nonprofit organization, an update on the editor search, funding updates, and then lastly on some of the journal policies that have to be written in the next couple weeks or months. Okay. Okay, just to go back to LPSC. We had a bunch of activities at LPSC. We had a community information session, a poster. We put up a bunch of flyers and talked to a lot of people. And the good thing is that almost everyone I would say everyone we talked to recognizes the need for having a cheaper publishing option in planetary science, and free is better than cheaper. So I think everyone's very enthused about this. There were a couple questions that came up over and over again, which I think we do need to address. The first is that there's a lot of people that still don't understand what Diamond Open Access actually means. So this is something I think we as a community need to kind of help the community understand what this kind of economic model means in comparison to the other journals that we have. Another thing that came up is that people kind of don't understand how a journal can be free when they're paying, $5,000 or up to $10,000 to publish in Nature. So I think what we need to do to address this is just on the website, just have a description, most likely in a frequently asked questions, a section which describes what the real costs are of publishing a journal and why we can give something away like this for free. Another question that came up several times, which is also has came up here in the forum and on these meetings, is about getting indexed in Web of Science and having an impact factor. Again, this is something that we can't do anything about. It's going to take about 2 or 3 years to get an impact factor, and this is something we just have to describe on the website just to let everyone know that we're on it and that there will be a delay. Another thing that came up during LPSC, this was in its time when NASA and the US government was shutting down all the assessment groups like VEXAG and MEPAG. A great suggestion came up from Noam Eisenberg, who suggested that we have a new article type for policies, and this would be to publish the reports from these assessment groups and perhaps other things. So I think this is a great idea. I talked to Noam about this a little bit, but we need to bring this up with the other assessment groups as well. And another idea that came up is one of my concerns is that we might get too many articles submitted to the journal. And what do we do if that happens? And one suggestion was that we can just split the journal into several journals. Just an example, we could have a planetary research reviews or planetary research policy related journals. So I think these are all good ideas, and these are things that we'll have to think about in probably about a year or two's time. Does anyone have any comments or questions about LPSC? Yeah, if not, I'll just move on. Okay, so the next thing is just a brief update on the Planetary Research Cooperative, which is the nonprofit association. The great thing is that this has been created. It's official as of March 27th, and just last week we got the official CRA and CRN numbers, which are necessary for doing any kind of financial transactions. And so right now we're in the process of opening a bank account, most likely with Wise, to facilitate international payments. And this will probably take a couple weeks because we're waiting for the domain name to transfer from one company to another, but this should hopefully be done by the end of the month. Second thing that we're doing is getting official email accounts for the journal with the planetaryresearch.org domain name. And for this, we'll probably go through OVH, which is the biggest cloud provider in France. This will probably take a couple weeks as well. In terms of the initial board of the cooperative, these are the people here that are listed. But what I just want to emphasize is that these members are temporary, and many of the members that were involved in creating the association are French, and this was partly out of necessity because we had to write the statutes in France, French, and then we had to do all the paperwork in French, and it just helped to have some French-speaking people involved in the project. But what we're hoping to do is maybe roughly at the end of this year is to start having some open elections where we can start the process of electing the members of the association as opposed to me naming the people myself. One of the other things that we need to do is create a simple website for the organization and also get some software for registering members. And this is important because the members will be the people voting in the elections. And what we're looking into for this is a solution that involves WordPress for the website and also the software, which is very powerful, CVCRM, for managing members and payments and things like that. And we're hoping to self-host this at IPGP so there won't be any cost involved. So in terms of the website, I'm willing to write the text for the website, but I really need someone to help with the design. So if someone likes WordPress and likes designing websites, just let me know. Also for this software CVCRM, it's really a interesting and powerful piece of software for associations, for managing events, for managing members, for sending out mass emails and things like that. So if anyone here is interested in learning how to use this, maybe because you're involved in another association, please get in contact with me because this will be a learning process for all of us. And if you're interested, you're more than welcome to help out. So that's about all I have to say about the nonprofit association. Does anyone have any comments or questions about this? Okay. If not, then we can move on. Next thing to go through is the search for editors. We had an announcement on March 1st for the open editor-in-chief, editors, associate editor positions. And what we said is that the deadline to apply is July 1st, with the hope that we would be able to seat the entire editorial board by or during the summer or by September 1st at the latest. But we would like to encourage everyone to apply as soon as possible because we'd like to start looking through the applications at the end of this month and start the selection process as soon as possible. So if you know people that are who might be interested in applying, please just spread the word and tell them to apply as soon as possible. For the application, it's very simple. It's really just an email describing why you want to be involved with the project and just a standard, CV and publication list. Also, we have some flyers that you can find on the website. So if anyone's going to any upcoming conferences like EGU or anything like that, you can download those, and it'd be great if you could print them out and just distribute them at the conference. In terms of the editor search committee, we have about 9 people involved at this point, and we're interested in getting more people involved in the search committee because we do have some kind of expertise gaps, especially related to remote sensing, MARS, and samples. So if you want to get involved with the editor search committee, just send me a message and there's probably no problem. We can just add you to the list. And it's really not too much work. At this point, all I really ask of people is that you just personally contact, 5 people just to get them to apply. And at some point, we just have to sit down and look at the applications, and that won't take too much time either because it's really just reading a email that's about 3 paragraphs long. So the amount of time that you'll spend on this won't be too much. In terms of the applications, I think so far things are going pretty well. We've gotten 26 applications as of today. 1 is for editor-in-chief, 4 is for editor position, and 21 for associate editors. And I would say, of these applications, most of them are pretty good. So, at least half of them are good. So I think we're, on the right track, and we could probably start to, have a good editorial board just with the applications we've gotten so far. Nevertheless, based on the applications that we've gotten, there are a few expertise gaps that I see. One, probably the most important, is just remote sensing in general, such as visible, near infrared, microwave, remote sensing. We have some gaps in that. Also, I think we need to get more people involved doing things like geology, Mars geology in particular, and Mars rovers. And it would also be great to find someone in cosmochemistry and isotopes. So if anyone here knows people that would be good and that could fill these expertise gaps, so that, please get in contact with them. Also, I do want to, point out that we do have a gender imbalance problem with the applications. So this is something that we're aware of and trying to address, but please take that into consideration when you invite people to apply. Okay, so that's about all I have to say about the editor search update. Does anyone have any comments or want to say anything about this?
I have a small comment. I feel like there's also a geographic imbalance problem.
Yeah.
So it's mostly US and Europe. So if you know people like that you think could do a good job and they come from not Europe or US, also contact them or contact us to contact them. I think that would be very good to have also more geographically spread editorial board.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say most of the people are from Central Europe, uh, a few people from the US, and then there's a couple people from individual countries in Brazil, South Africa, a couple from China as well, which is good. I don't, maybe one from Japan, but I think we need to, we should be as geographically diverse as possible. But I think the major problems I see with that so far is Japan. We only have one application, and I think that applicant is in something that's outside the scope of the journal. And also we have a couple people from China, but I think we have to get more people from China as well. Any other comments about the editor search? If not, I will move on. Okay, the funding updates. So this is still not resolved, but there's potentially some good news at the end. But I'll just go through what's happened since the last meeting. The first is that we did get a small grant funded from the University Paris-Cité Space Campus just for 2,500 euros. And this will just be for setting up some very simple web services and things like that. Really, the only thing we're going to be paying for right now is an email server, and also we may pay someone to do a little bit of graphic design work, but we don't need too much money just to get things started. We also submitted a proposal to CNRS asking if they could help us support the first year's operation of the journal. And we just got a response from them about a week ago. And I would say they're in general positive, but they asked us to follow up with a long-term business plan. And I don't think this is an issue because I think the plan that we have, or that we had anyways, was to create a consortium of planetary science funding agencies and national space agencies. And if we split the cost, each of these organizations would only, pay about 2,000 or 3,000 euros per year. And we've already had some tentative commitments from DLR and Europlanets, which is good. And I've contacted the French PNP grant program. I'm still waiting for a response from them, but I suspect it would be positive. But if we decide to create a consortium, I think we just have to have everyone that's in a different country to find the relevant funding agency or national space agency and to contact them and to see if at this stage, we're just asking to see if people are interested in contributing, and it won't be for another couple of years until we ask them to actually sign something and transfer the money. Laurent, did you have a question? You're muted.
Yeah, I do have a question about this. So I mean, I really thank you so much for like trying to find all those monies and to connect all of these people. I cannot imagine doing that personally. So great work. One thing that I am a little bit concerned here is, well, okay, so right now, a lot of journals make agreement with individual how you call that, the individual funding agencies, so that, you know, they pay for either like a bunch of papers or like they have some agreement, we don't pay, but it's going to be open access, etc. And I am a little bit concerned here that, for example, why would CNRS want to pay for a paper that comes from, oh, I don't know, the United States? So is that something that is being raised by those organizations, that maybe they would want to then kind of limit a little bit the origin of the papers that would be submitted, that would be published, if they are funding it? I mean, I could see that from a business perspective, they could be tempted by that. I just don't know if that's something that's been raised with you yet.
So far, the discussions we've had have been pretty informal, and when I talk to Europlanets, they don't seem to care. And I think that the major thing is that, to me, the investment is really symbolic. It's 2,000 or 3,000 euros from an organization that has millions. Really is not, to me, not a big investment. But at the same time, I have to say that the only two people that we've had contact with and said that they were actually interested in contributing was DLR libraries in Berlin and Europlanets. I've contacted PNP, and I think for many of these agencies, what we probably have to say is that if they give us some kind of financial contribution, that in return they may decide not to fund publication costs. I think that's the most likely route of what's going to happen if we go this route. So, but anyways, I totally understand what you're saying, but I think the biggest thing, I think the response really is that the investment is so small that the US is not going to care if they're spending 2,000 euros and
No, it's not about the US caring about
going
this.
to
The US
Europe.
doesn't care anymore. We know that.
Yeah.
But it's more like, say, CNRS saying, yes, but I don't want to support, say, US or Japan or Australia or China or Russia or whatever, right?
Yeah.
This is more like that way, right? If they because you said that it's small amount, you're right, it's a small amount in the grand scheme of things, but once you got politician and administrator and involved, they're not scientists, they're not going to think about it as a small amount. They're just going to say this is my money I'm giving you. So I don't know. I again, thank you for doing all of this heavy work, right? I know it's not easy. It's just the conversation that I am a little bit concerned when it comes from national funding agencies. Libraries, no problem, but I can see that being a point of contention in the future.
Yeah. Well, anyways, the last point hopefully is going to resolve all these problems. But in terms of the getting funding from individual countries, my impression in France is that I first went to CNRS, and CNRS is a big organization, so it moves slowly, and people are inclined to say no. But with the PNP, it's the Programme National de Planetologie. It's financed by CNES and by CNRS. And they actually give out small grants to the French planetary science community, and some of that money goes towards publication costs. And I think an organization like that would be happy to give a couple thousand euros and then maybe decide, to stop funding publication costs altogether. But I totally understand what you're saying, and I think the bigger the organization is, the more likely they're going to have those concerns.
Yeah, but we can. I would like also to react on that. We can also take the counter argument, because they would be very happy to have a publication with their logo, so an international recognition of the value of CNRS or whatever. And I think this, with for 2,000 euro, they will be very happy about that. So I'm not sure that it will be a problem to make the journal run only with French money if it gives them the visibility. I mean, this is exactly what happens with the journal. I have to remember exactly so it's I presented you that a couple of months ago. I don't know if you remember, but they run that in biology, and it's only from French funding, even I think from university funding, and it's quite small amount, and so they are very happy to run it for everybody. Then the system is set, and they don't care if nobody. If I mean, it's not only a French-oriented journal, so.
Yeah, I mean, but of course, the counterpart to it is some of the Project S or something, some of the early open source requirement that came in Germany and other places, and that essentially put aside some funding, went directly to a publisher, but that was to be used only for publication that came from a German institute, and that made also a lot of sense from a business perspective. So anyway, let's see how they react. I hope to be as
Yes.
optimistic as you are.
Well, Laurent, wait till we get to the last point, because hopefully all these problems are moot in the end. So, but anyways, the second after CNRS, which if we have to, I will respond with a long-term business plan. There's no problem. The second thing is we started writing a proposal with Opus, which is the open science publications of the Université Paris-Cité. And the idea is that they would fund the first 300 articles of the journal, which would be the first 2 or 3 years. And the deadline for this is May 21, so it's coming up really, really quickly. So we need to make some progress on this. But after we started writing this proposal, Frederick Schmidt here came to me and said that the University Paris-Saclay may be willing to pay for all the cost. And we have a meeting with the Paris-Saclay DBSO, which is the Open Science and Publications Department of Paris-Saclay. We have a meeting with them tomorrow. And if all goes well, my hope is that we can, partner with Paris-Saclay instead of University Paris-Cité, and they will pay all the costs, at least for the first several years. And if they change their policies later, then we'll have to come back to this question of how do we fund the journal. But yeah, hopefully we'll have more information tomorrow about this.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Frederick,
Just
you
to
can say
complete.
something more about this since you're closer to those people than I am.
Yeah, sure. Just to complete on that, actually, all the cost, we are just talking here about the editorial cost. Of course, the website, if you want to pay a little bit of amount for the editorial board, then this is completely excluded. The idea here is that they provide the web service and the editorial service for free for all the journal hosted by their service. So the name is POPs, but anyway, inside the DBSO. So from my understanding, they want to do that because they want to start the service. They want to start and basically an editorial service at university, because we hadn't that so far in Paris-Saclay, and so that's why there is funding for that, and they are very happy to have a new journal. So and our project seems very timely in that sense. So it's very good. Of course, the long term, I would say that project would be to have something that is fully automatized, and we don't have to have manual inspection of all the papers or the minimum of it. So then the cost is not that high. Of course, if you want to reread, correct the grammar and all the sentence and things like that, then I think they cannot cover this cost and claim that they will do that for the next 40 years. But if it's just, formatting and maybe correcting some typos, I think this is the kind of thing that can be quite easily automatized and could be included in the full project of the DBSO. That's the idea.
Yeah, and I would, from my perspective, I think they're offering exactly the same thing that Opus is offering us. So with the Opus proposal we were going to write, they were going to do the typesetting, just the formatting of the article, converting it into the final formats, which would be HTML and PDF. Also, they would do probably the kind of a minimum effort to make sure that the bibliography is correctly formatted. And then in terms of rereading and correcting grammar, we weren't going to ask for them to do that. And I think this is something that we can do ourselves. And also, I think for the foreign people who submit articles, they're going to use ChatGPT anyways. So I think this is going to get a little easier with time. But I think what DBSO is proposing is exactly the same thing that Opus was. So from our perspective, I don't think it's going to make any difference whether we partner with one or the other. And also just for some context, like when I first started this project, I was really expecting that University Paris Cité and IPGP would say this is a great project and they want to pay for it because it's really cheap, in my opinion. And when they said no, I was kind of surprised. And that's when we had to start looking for these alternative options for finding funding. And if the University Paris-Saclay is interested in our project and wants to pay for it, I'm happy to let them do so.
Okay, so let's see tomorrow, but yeah, for the moment, it seems quite positive.
Yeah, the only concern well, it's not a concern, but with DBSO, I would say they're a little younger in terms of a organization than Opus is, and it may be tight for us to launch the journal on January 1st. I think it's still feasible to have that kind of timeline, but if we, for whatever reason, have to push off the launch of the journal by a couple months or something, it's not a catastrophe.
Yeah, fully agree with that. The problem is that they are only testing now the OGS software, website, and things like that. And so they should finalize the test at the end of the summer and ready to publish things starting in September. So they are really at the starting point. So clearly, Opus is ahead, maybe 1 or 2 years ahead. But yes, that's part of the deal. I mean, this is the way it is. But clearly, they are really motivated to go for this. So I think this is really nice.
Yeah, in terms of Ingrid's comment in the chat about, she thinks it's a great idea to have grammar and spelling checks. So I totally agree. And if they are willing to do this, then that's great. The only thing is that it does cost money. And when we asked Opus to do that, it pretty much doubled the cost from roughly $100 per article to $200 per article. It's not a huge amount of money. It's just that if we have to pay for it, then we just have to find the funding. I'm hoping that DBSO will offer to do this at least for the first year or two until we get started, and then maybe afterwards we'll have to find some kind of contribution to pay for that. Also, I think we'll find out whether we, over the first year of running the journal, like how much help we need with things like grammar checking and things like that.
Yeah, I just get nervous when you say we'll do it ourselves.
It
could end up being a lot of work, right? And we might just not know till we get some papers in. Yeah.
No, I agree.
Viewer, it's been a lot of work for me in the past, so yeah, I would just want to be wary of that.
No, I agree. First thing I would say is that the other Diamond Open Access journals in geosciences, they do all this themselves, and it is a lot of work, and I don't think we should be doing that. So we should limit this as much as possible. But from a native English speaker whose English isn't that great, my impression is that at AGU with the typesetting or copy editing is that they make more errors than they fix. So it's not clear to me what kind of benefit we actually get from this. And I think it will be trial and error to see if we ask someone to do grammar checking and then they change all the scientific words to meaningless things, it might not be worth it in the end.
No,
so I don't know what to say. I think we should try to get the service, but we'll see how it works and whether we have to pay for it or not.
Sounds good.
Benoit has multiple actors in the funding model to avoid being locked in. So this is I think the main reason why we started this nonprofit association is that if for whatever reason we're unhappy with DBSO or Opus or both of them, we can pick up and leave and go somewhere else. We may have to sign some kind of exclusive contract for a small amount of time with them, but the fact that we have that the journal will be owned and run by the nonprofit organization will make it easier for us to move if we have to. So I think this will help us to avoid being locked in with a single provider. Any other questions about the funding situation? I think unfortunately we just have to wait until the end of the week to see how things go with DBSO. And if DBSO says yes, then I'm just going to completely ignore these previous proposals that we've started writing because they're no longer relevant. Nevertheless, I think what we do need to do regardless is that at some point we still need to ask for donations to have some kind of reserve with the journal so in case there is a funding problem where DBSO or Opus or whatever says that the prices go up by a factor of 2, or that they say that they can't work with us anymore, that we actually have funding to keep the journal running for a couple of years. So I think this is something we need to think about later. But regardless, I think we still need to have some kind of reserves for the journal for that situation.
Maybe one remark. There is this APR, we call it from CNES in September now. I think it would be probably also interesting to ask for this because for CNES, it's clearly a little amount of money, and we can argue that this will help the community. But you're right, what you said before is very important. If the aim is to say, we will not consider publication cost anymore, then of course we have to be cautious. So I don't think we have to present it this way. It's more, here there is a way to publish a good science paper for free, but scientists should have the right to choose where they want to submit. And of course, if they want to choose another journals they can, but CNES can also still continue to pay for that. But at least to have the opportunity to have an open source diamond access, I think it's quite important. And of course, they will reduce a bit the publication cost, but in general, this is the way they cut the proposal. So I'm not sure that we will lose something at the end from CNES.
Yeah, so I've talked to some people in CNES, and I'm not sure if you were here when we started this conversation, but the problem with these institutions is that the bigger the institution, the more of a problem it is to get them to move and to act on anything. So the worst case scenario would be ESA, which would be a great partner, but everyone says don't count on it. I'll still try anyways. With CNES, I've talked to several people on the different levels, the SPC, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what all the acronyms mean anymore. And there's always someone on the board who has a contrarian point of view and they want to know more about it. And it's just going to make the process very long. And I think something like PNP, where they get funding from both CNES and from CNRS, and the proposals that they fund are on the small side, I think an organization like that would be easier to have them react and to get some quick funding.
Yes,
but I agree. We should
agree for this year for sure, but for next year, I think CNES is possible. At least that would be good to apply, and we will see.
Yeah. Also with the CNES, based on my interactions with them in the past month or so, what I would do is wait until Europlanets and DLR says that they're in, and then go to CNES and say, oh, look at this, your biggest, competitors or whatever are part of this project, and we're going to the Italians and going to the Spaniards and everyone else. And I think at that point, CNES, they would have to react and say yes. So anyways, with the funding situation, I say we just wait until the end of the week, and hopefully things will clear up pretty quickly. And I think a lot of these funding issues hopefully will disappear for the next year or two, if we decide to partner with DBSO. Okay. Yeah, for the comment for Benoit, that I agree that in certain countries there is a momentum to fund these types of things, and I know in places like Germany and the Netherlands there is a lot of money being allocated right now for these projects, and that this money might dry up and disappear in 5 years. In France, it's the same thing with this FNSO proposal we were thinking of writing. It's something it's the fourth time they've had this call for proposals, and they do it every 3 or 4 years, and it's not clear whether this will be the last one or not. So, this is something that we need to think about as well, is that the funding for open science, even though today it might be fairly good, that this funding may dry up pretty quickly. Okay, I'm going to just move on to the next and last topic, which is the text and for the journal website and also the policies for the journal. And this is just to remind everyone of what's actually been written so far. And the good thing is that we're slowly making progress, and I think we're almost at the end. In terms of the website that's written, in terms of about the journal, we've written the scope, the principles, the governance, editorial board, some kind of privacy statement, contact information. In terms of the documents for authors, we've written the article types that we'll be accepting and also describe the peer review process. And then in terms of the detailed policies, we have policies on authorship, plagiarism, name changes, special issues, preprints and prior publication, errata, corrections, and retractions. So this is pretty much everything that needs to be done. Some of these have been highly edited by people on the forum, whereas others have not. So none of these, what's been written is written in stone. So if people read them and want to make changes, please go ahead and do so. I suspect after we seat the editorial board, we'll go through this once again and probably make some final changes as well. But there are a couple things that need to be done, and hopefully before summer. There's 3 big policies that need to be written, and with all 3 of these, I need some input from the community. So the first is the use of AI, and we already started a discussion about this on the forum. So if anyone has comments or has ideas on how we should treat AI, please go to the forum and just let us know your opinion. But I think we need to have 4 sub-policies. One has to do with language improvement, and I think this is something that we can't avoid. And in my opinion, we probably don't even need to acknowledge that we've used, something like AI to improve the grammar. This can be discussed whether we should acknowledge it or not. The second thing that needs to be discussed is generative imagery. I went through all of the policies of all the major journals, and no journals allow using generative imagery. So I think this is something that we have to avoid as well. Nevertheless, I think there is a possible exception we could allow, but I'm not sure if this exists at the moment. But this would be for models that are trained on material where they have the actual rights to use that material without attribution. So this would be using material that has a so-called CC0 license, a Creative Commons 0 license, which means it's in the public domain and you can use it without attributing where it came from. So to me, this is one possible exception we could use, is AI that's trained on this material, but this is something we can discuss. A third thing is the use of AI as a scientific analysis tool. And I think this is the consensus is that AI used for scientific analysis is just like any other analysis tool. If you use it, you just have to describe what you did. And the last thing is, which I'm less certain about, is some guidelines for reviewers. And the problem I see is that there may be confidentiality issues if a reviewer decides to upload a manuscript to ChatGPT for whatever reason, or if the reviewer decides to write the review with the help of ChatGPT to correct grammar and things like that. So it's, there's a potential confidentiality issue with this if the model like ChatGPT is online and you have no idea where the data is going, if it's being used to retrain the model. So in any case, these are the 4 things I think we need to discuss. And I don't know if people want to discuss this here or not, but there's some discussion going on online about this. Let's see.
I'll just say
Yeah.
I agree in principle about the use of Chat GPT to just improve grammar, but it does seem like that's a really fuzzy line, and it would be very difficult to enforce. If we say improving grammar is okay, but not generating content, how is that enforceable, and where is the line between it?
That's a good point. The way I'm looking at this is that we cannot detect whether AI has been used.
Yeah.
And even if we can detect it today, we won't be able tomorrow.
Yeah,
So
that's absolutely
I
true.
think this has to be something it's a declaration by the author that they're following our policies. The other thing is that I think we have to be extremely careful just to have a very strong plagiarism policy, because I think the biggest risk with AI is plagiarism, whether it's with text or with imagery. And
Right. Yeah.
we have a plagiarism policy, and I think we have to have a zero tolerance policy where if there's one sentence that is plagiarized, that we just have to force the author to make a correction. And if they don't correct the article, that we will retract it. So I think we just have to
Yeah.
make sure that people are aware that there's a risk of using AI. Plagiarism is the risk, and we have a zero tolerance policy for plagiarism.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I guess it's always going to come down to an ethical issue, and we're always going to have to ask the author to, tell us if they used it and how. So I think if we're going to do that for other aspects, we might as well use it for all aspects. So if they used it to improve grammar, fine, just make a statement, say I used ChatGPT to improve the grammar. And then it's the same policy across the board. It's easier for us to enforce.
Frederick, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, so about generative imagery, so scientific analysis tool, you mean actually is something that basically an artificial intelligence that was done for the science, and so yes, this should be an exception. I think this is very important, but it's scientific analysis or any kind of purpose. If it's something that the people just wanted to include in the article, I think you have to remove this. I think this is very important to to accept this kind of science in a journal. There are some large language models that you can run locally. I don't know if you know that. It's
Yeah.
a bit complicated not to do that, but I guess it will be more and more easy to do that. And so I think the problem is not really artificial intelligence or large language model by itself. It's more where you run it and who will be aware of this data. And so I think we have to also phrase it the way to be acceptable if they run it on their own instance of the large language model, because then we don't care. It's really, I mean, there's no problem of data, except of course if they are trained with confidential data, and then there is always a problem with the plagiarism.
Yeah, I agree with all these points. Laurent, you had your hand up.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I think in terms of the language improvement, this is probably the one, allowing some artificial intelligence corrections and improvement is the way to go. Everybody's going to do it soon, and that does not mean ChatGPT, by the way. That's only one solution. Personally, I've been using Grammarly a lot, but there's probably a bit less of that confidentiality issues in that, because if it's really just for correcting language. In fact, I would advocate for putting on the website somewhere statements that any articles may be processed by artificial intelligence to improve grammar and clarities, to kind of have like this blanket statement, because that will make life easier in the long term. It's, I think the word that was said was ethics at some point was mentioned in there. I just want to share an experience about when I was at JGR Planets, where we actually did have a paper that was supposed to do a machine learning analysis, and we got figured out, was pointed out in reviews, that it did not quite do what it was saying. The problem there was, how do you prove it? I mean, obviously the authors, no, we are doing it. I know, you know, we all think we are honest, and we are all, if we would be happy to just accept a statement by the authors, but unfortunately not everybody's following those standards. And it was a pain. It was very difficult to actually figure out truly what had happened there. It took several months, and, you know, lawyers got involved and things like that. So I'm just saying that in terms of some of the responsibilities and potential cost of publication, that's something that I need not even think of, but this type of protections and inquiry. And it's not just for this, it's also about like authorship issues, and sometimes there's some problems with that. We have to be a little bit mindful of this, that not everybody is as honest as the people in this room. I think, Mark, you're muted, and I don't know if anybody wants to say something, or if we just pass on to the next raised hand person.
I don't hear anything from Mark. Mark is muted, but I'll go ahead and I'll talk. My hand is raised. Sorry. Should I? Oh, Mark, you're unmuted now.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
I was muted.
Don't worry. One quick comment regarding the AI and all the data protection. Depending on the kind of AI that you use, there are some kind of different plans that you can buy that do not get your data added into training the model. For example, if you get Microsoft Copilot and you use it from a company account, so it's like a paid plan, you get an enterprise data protection, which means that the data that you add, that you type to your prompt in your AI Copilot thing is not going to get used for training the model. And in a situation like that, they say it's safe and it's not going to get any of the things that you add in there, and it's not going to use to do anything. So in a situation like that, is it okay to use? Because the only reason that we are saying we don't want people to use is for confidentiality? Or do we have another extra reason that we would like to add in there to make sure that people know that AI in general, not only AI that reuses what you type to train the model?
These are all good questions, and I don't know. I think everyone should try to make their opinions known on the forum, and I'll try to summarize things next week. But I think the two main issues are confidentiality. We should have some kind of policy or recommendations anyways, because we won't be able to enforce these policies, to be honest. But we do have to give recommendations to the reviewers and authors and hope that they follow them. I think that's the best we can do. But so I think confidentiality is an issue with the reviews and uploading manuscripts to write AI generated reviews. That's one problem. And I think the other problem is just the use of AI models that are trained on material where they don't attribute the material that was used in the training. So to me, those are the two kind of ways we should be looking at this problem. But everyone's points that were made, I agree, and I think this is something that we need to be careful about. And unfortunately, as Laura mentioned, it's kind of hard to prove that someone used AI or used AI incorrectly. And unfortunately, because of that, I think the only the only resort that we have is just to have, sturdy ethical recommendations, and then have a strong anti-plagiarism policy if they violate that. So, but in any case, please, everyone, just let me know what your comments are in the forum, and I'll try to summarize everything and try to make everyone happy, which probably is impossible. But Bertrand, you have your hand up.
Yes, hello. Well, we can't really know what people are doing. I mean, they could even send the paper to someone else and to the competitors of the authors, and it has been the case since the beginning of peer reviewing. So I think, yeah, the point is to make recommendations and hope that people respect them. And if we have then afterwards prove that they didn't respect them, there will be consequences. But I mean, let's not put an unenforceable standards. Yeah, it's complicated, and yeah. So that's what I want to say. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's a good point as well. Okay, so let's move on from AI. There's two more policies that need to be written, and I think both of these are also hard, so this is why they're at the end. One is a data availability policy, and in general, I think we should just use something that's very similar to what's being used at AGU, but we need to go through their policies and make sure that we adapt them to our purposes, but I don't think it should be too different than what AGU is doing. And the second thing we need to do is come up with a code of conduct for several things. One is for the association members, but also perhaps separate codes of conduct for authors and reviewers. And then there's also this question of scientific ethics, if this is part of the code of conduct or if it's something separate. But I will definitely need help with writing this. So if anyone really is interested in these types of things, please let me know because I'll need some help. Otherwise, I'll just ask an AI to write it. So, which maybe wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, Ingrid, I know you mentioned that you'd help before, so thanks. And Benoit. Okay, two people.
We may have some help, sorry, from the lawyers from Paris-Saclay. I think really count on them. So how can we proceed? So maybe the best is to make a list of what we need from the law perspective, and then we can just send them, and I think they will proceed with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so with what I suggest doing, and which is what we actually did with Opus, is we just had them comment on the policies that we've written so far and to give us pointers as to what's missing and things like that. So I think as soon as we have like the AI policy written and maybe the data availability policy, that we should ask DBSO to read through everything and let us know what's missing. And also we may need to have some kind of highly legalistic policy, like just a legal matters web page which describes the legal matters and things like that, and that we may need some help from a professional lawyer to help.
Okay, sounds perfect.
Okay, so good. There's several people that want to help with the code of conduct. So please just write this, upload it to the forum, and then I'll take a look at it. We can, what I always do with writing these policies is I just start by looking at what other journals have done. And surprisingly, the policies for most journals are pretty bad. So and also hard to find, unfortunately. But that's the first step, is just to find out what the other journals are using for codes of conduct and things like that. Okay, anyways, that's the last slide I have for today. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions about anything. I'm willing to stay online for however long it takes. But are there any other comments, questions about what we discussed today, or any walk-on
Can I
topics?
ask something about the data availability? Do we want to make it that they have to submit the data upon first submission? And if yes, how do we enforce that? Is the editor that has to check or the reviewer, they have to say like, because I know JGR says yes, but sometimes I had already received papers reviewed that say, oh, we're working on the data availability and I don't have upon first review. You know, I don't know if it's something that we want to be very strict about and these things.
Well, I think AGU in general is fairly strict about this, though it may depend on the editor who's in charge of the manuscript. For me, the biggest problem is that for most of the time I upload my data to Zenodo, and it's hard to upload your data to Zenodo in a private manner and then share that data set with the reviewers. I know that there's other data providing services where it might be easier, but at least with Zenodo, it's kind of awkward to do that. And the problem with AGU is that they require that you upload the data, get a DOI, and then cite the data that you're using in your own paper. And that's kind of hard to do before the data's been gone through the review process because it may change. If it changes, you don't want to have a list of, previous data sets which turn out to be wrong or have errors in them. So, it's problematic how you share the data during the review process. But in general, I think that the AGU approach of having to cite the data sets is a good thing. And you just have to make sure that it's the editor that enforces the policies. Laurent, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just want to speak about how it was handled at AGU until, 2 years ago or 18 months or whatever. So first, if it was not the editor that really checked that, but actually the person in the journal's inbox who makes the quality check, it was supposed to be part of this quality check that we are all frustrated with. Second, the way that AGU, the statements, I'm not sure why you're surprised that the statements are so bad, Mark. I mean, they are like, doctored work, so it's awful. So the statement says that, yes, it's supposed to be available at initial submission, but it's up to each journal to enforce that or not. And so some journals, like say James, were very strong about this, but at JGR, we're like, as long as it's available publicly when we finalize and publish the paper, we're happy. So that's why we were not so strict about the initial submission. Even though the quality control required something, so that's where we're like, if you can give us a private access link, which I know Zenodo is difficult on that. There are others that are easier, but that's what it was. And that was kind of meant as a middle ground to make it possible for people to share something, but it's not public, it's not finalized. People can edit it after the fact and get a clean DOI after the fact, as long as they do that before we publish the paper. So I would recommend going in a similar direction because, like you said, it's impossible to require people to have a finalized, open, public version of their data at the first submission. Some people will have to change some of the analysis and show and change the results. Like, how is that possible? So I agree with that. I would just say, yeah, probably want to have something at least so that the author knows that it will be needed at some point. And it would be silly to have an open diamond access journals without having the open data coming with it. That's a bit nonsensical. Sorry.
Yeah, also just to add to that, it's kind of an iterative process as well. I think, AGU, you have the quality control where the support staff go through and they see if there's something that's obviously missing. Sometimes they ask you to upload data for a cosine curve, which is totally idiotic. But then I think it's the editor that has to go through really quickly and see if there's anything that's obviously missing. And then during the review process, you ask the reviewers to say, are there any data sets or any data that's plotted in figures that needs to be made available? And over the review process, you kind of iterate onto what's really necessary. And by the end, everything should be uploaded to an archive with it and cited by a DOI. Yes, there's someone with their hand up.
Me, probably. I don't know if that has been discussed in detail really, but one should be quite specific, I think, about what data is at all, because that can vary in several respects. In particular, I'm thinking of the sets of data sets. For example, in a numerical model, you can generate hundreds of gigabytes of data, which you have to analyze in some way, and it doesn't really make sense to upload all this stuff. Nobody will be able to work with that, and it's probably not of interest. So I guess one should specify somehow where to draw the line.
Yeah, I would just say is that I think the person that draws the line is more or less the editor and the reviewers. If you're doing mantle convection simulations, like those are the people who will know what actually needs to be uploaded, because they realize you can't upload every single time step of these simulations. So it's kind of hard to have a blanket policy, and I think we have to give the editors the leeway to make that decision on their own.
I think that very often you end up in a negotiation stage, like this is what I can get, and so I'll be happy with it. I don't think it's actually feasible to have a priori rules to say, in this case, we'll want this, in that case, we'll want that. You need the data available for understanding and being able to reproduce and reuse. That's another thing that's often forgotten. Reuse the results. One thing that, it's often difficult to even people to give you the processed or the results of the analysis. They only want to give you the starting point and not what they ended up doing, which require people to recreate everything. That's not should be avoided if possible. So we should get as much of the processed and derived data as possible. That's actually often the useful one.
Yeah, but my point is that this should be made clear at some point, because in particular with JGR, we have had the discussion pretty much every time we submit a paper, what to upload or what they mean by data, and we never feel that we arrive at a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with AGU is the initial quality control, where the people who are first assessing the manuscript are not really scientists or experts in the field, and sometimes they make recommendations that just don't make too much sense. So I'm hoping that if we skip that and just leave it up to the editor and reviewers, hopefully it'll make it a little more obvious.
Okay.
Don't forget the codes. Signing in the codes is very helpful, even if you don't have the final results, which is gigabytes. Having the code available so that people can use it or rerun the things that they ever care for. That's very helpful.
But the code is another problem if it's not open source.
And it should be, especially in an open diamond journal.
Yes, but you don't always have control over that. For example, I have been using StackYY by Paul Tackley, and that's not really, it's a widely used code. Everybody knows it, but it's not open source, and you can't post it somewhere. And I think it would be a bad idea to exclude all collaborators of Paul Tackley's, for example.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about this, because in some sense we could take the hard line by saying that we're an open access journal following open science principles, and if you don't want to adhere to that, that's fine. Just publish your work elsewhere. But at the same time, I also would not be happy to exclude all the work that comes from StackYY or work that comes from like these impact codes like CTH and things like that. So I'm not quite certain what to do about this, and this is something where we have to make a decision on what the policy of the journal is, and I think this is going to be one of the hard ones.
the solution that we came up with was to consider StackYY a legacy code, and so therefore we can't request after the fact that it's made open data. So as long as you indicate how to get access to it, which unfortunately means an email to Paul, and this just the example you mentioned, but there's plenty of others. Then we have to be satisfied with that. But then please sign at least the part that you get control upon, like your input code, your file like this, so that people can rerun it if they need to. But that was not a very satisfactory solution, but I agree with you, this is a major issue. And I agree with Mark, if they don't want to be in open, doing open science, why, let them do it wherever they want.
Well, that's one possible solution. The other way to look at it is that we're a community journal and we should publish what the community wants. And I don't know where I fall on this debate.
And I want StackYY to become open.
Yeah. The other issue with the data availability has to do with proprietary data sets. I think this is less important than planetary science, but I know with in the geosciences with seismology and things like that, proprietary data sets are an issue. But this is something where we should at least have a policy written, even if we don't use it that often. And also in terms of these proprietary data sets, in some cases, this could apply to, for example, the first Chinese lunar mission. They did not make the data available for a long time. So, it's not just proprietary because it's owned by a company. It could be national space agencies that are not making the data available to the public. So anyways, I think this is going to be a hard policy to write, which is why it's at the end, but it has to be done. So if people could start commenting on this and the forum as well, that would be great. And I think the most logical starting point are the policies at AGU, which I think in general are pretty good. So. Are there any other comments or questions or any walk-on topics? Yeah. If not, then I'll close the meeting and looking forward to seeing all your comments on the forum about the AI policy and code of conduct. And I'll get back to everyone in about a week after we have this meeting with the University Paris-Saclay about potentially funding the journal, and hopefully that will resolve a lot of our unresolved issues. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I will close the meeting and I'll try to organize one in 1 month's time. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Mark. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.